And we are live, so we'll give it a minute for everyone who is going to join to get connected. It can take a few minutes sometimes. And typically, as the stream starts to go, a lot of people join later in as far as even 10 or 20 minutes out sometimes. So that's how it goes. But welcome everyone who is already here. Thank you for joining us for another Friday live stream. If you get a chance, drop a comment down below. Let us know who you are and who's here and what you guys might want to talk about tonight. Uh, we've got a guest today. It's one of the weeks that we've got a guest. This is Mike. Mike works, or owns, I should say, Dino Precision. Some of you may or may not be familiar with them. Been around a little while with everything that's been going on in the world and all the chaos. Um, they are looking at what they want to do differently. And Mike has a very deep background in machining, machine repair. Um, I mean, the guy's probably been inside a million different shops in the world all across the country. So Mike's got a real good head on his shoulders for experience when it comes to this kind of stuff. And many of us look to Mike for a lot of our problems and questions, especially when it comes to fixing machines, especially. But Mike's going to get to answer a lot of these questions. Just kind of wanted to give you guys some background into who he is and whatnot. Um, Mike, why don't we just go ahead and do this? Why don't you start with who you are, maybe where you live, what your background is, how you got into, machining and things of that nature. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, Mike Bose. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. So I was kind of like into cars, obviously, uh, and went to school for automotive. Then kind of bounced around, going to like local university, did some engineering, and then decided I hated the university life. Took some welding classes, and then my friend was like, "Hey, I've got a job you might actually be interested in," and it was servicing CNC machines, which I don't think I had ever seen up until that point. So, yeah, did that for 10 years and kind of picked up a little bit on of the machining side. But until I got my own machine, it was kind of, you know, learning as you go. I knew a little bit, but just enough to be dangerous. No, Tyler, I am not Joe's younger brother.
We'll get to the
Actually, I'm not sure which
questions.
one of us is even older.
That's a good question. I'll be 35 in February. I don't know where that puts you.
Okay. Yeah, you got me by a couple years.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll
Well, there you
be
go.
34 next year. So,
Well, thank you for making me feel old. Uh, though Nick has us beat. Nick and Echo Machine and Alva both tend to make me feel young because they're both a few years our senior. So it's interesting. You've got a very similar background to kind of my background. I think a lot of our viewers probably have a similar background. You have, I think, cars and guns kind of just go together naturally. Would you say?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, kind of the curious about how things work, how they function kind of thing. So,
And that's what it's about for a lot of people, especially suppressor building. I think it's about that mechanical side, and then it's also about that theoretical side, and just trying to go, man, these things are so interesting, right? If you really get into it. But I have the same background. I started off in the automotive side too. Went to school for automotive, and then I also um, I learned under a machinist who was an engine rebuilder and stuff like that, and that's how I got my start in kind of machine work and stuff. So kind of similar paths, but very different. I didn't go working on machines for a living, where you did. So why don't you give us a little bit more detail about that? Like, what does it mean to go work on machines for a living? Who do you work? Like, what does that mean?
yeah. So I worked for a distributor, so basically like the dealership for machines. Obviously, you can't really bring a machine to you to fix it, so we had to go out, and we covered basically about a 3-hour radius from Omaha, and you basically have to just go into whatever machine shop, factory, what have you, and figure out what's wrong with the machine and try and get it fixed. They're surprisingly simple, but yet complicated. Especially a lot of the new stuff is getting a little bit more complicated, but they're also being better engineered to be easier to work on. I think Haas are kind of the easiest to work on, even though I've only worked on mine. Uh, but I worked for the Akuma distributor, which is a higher end Japanese brand, and just the part of the country I'm in, we had a lot of older machines. A lot of machine shops started by more or less farmers, and so they bought a bunch of Akumas when they were new, and now 30 plus years later, they're still ticking, so they want to get them fixed.
Would you say that was mostly what you did, working on older machines, not really so much like warranty or maintenance type newer stuff?
Yeah, new machine installs, I would say we probably had like, I would do myself like 5 to 10 a year, and they could be 1 to 2 week to install it. So a vast majority of my time was spent on older machines.
Gotcha.
Machines that
So,
actually still took 8-inch floppies and paper tape and all that fun stuff.
and I think that's cool because you've kind of gotten to see it all, from the kind of older stuff, less technical stuff, to you've gotten to get to see
Mm-hmm.
some of the newer stuff. So you've got a pretty broad range of experience. I know every time any of the guys ask you for an opinion on one of the, should I buy this machine or what you think's wrong with this machine, always fascinates me because you always already know like a decent amount about that, and I think that's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's just being around it for 10 years or so. It's actually just under 10 years when I quit back in April. So, I
So
think
that segues
July
us
would have been.
into why you quit and what you're going to do and what you are doing, basically.
Yeah, so I guess why I quit. So obviously back in March, things took a big change, and so the products that I sold, I'm not planning on bringing back anytime soon. Uh, but I was pretty well prepared to make a pretty big investment, a couple more machines, get a bigger shop, all that, and then suddenly everything was gone. So it took about a month or so, and I was like, you know, I don't really want to give up on it yet, but uh, I kind of talked with my wife a little bit, and she was like, now would probably be the time to just kind of give it a go, see what happens. And so on April Fool's Day, I turned in my 2 weeks' notice, and both my bosses were like, all right, this isn't actually a joke, is it? So yeah, ever since then, been working on trying to develop new products. Lately, I've also been kind of coming full circle with the machine shop I had cutting my parts originally, back when I started in May of 2020. They reached out to me and they're like, hey, we're getting pretty far behind again. We heard your lathe isn't really running and wanted to know if you'd be interested in making some parts for us. So, been running those the past, I think, 3 weeks. They've been pretty time consuming, but, pays the bills and can't complain there.
What I think is very cool is that you're just like any of us. Like, yes, you have a deep machining background because of your day job, but you didn't already have a shop initially. You didn't
Mm-hmm.
own any machines. You didn't have a financial backer to come in and go, hey, we'll start this big facility. I mean, you literally,
Yeah.
you're a model for what many of us could be. If you wanted to get into this kind of stuff, maybe
Hmm.
talk about what is that first step. Finding your first machine. Obviously, it's got to be on the cheap, probably, right?
Yeah. So back when I first started Dino, I think my first order was like $3,500, and it was on net 30 terms, and so I actually didn't pay anything out of pocket. I was able to get the parts, get them sold, and able to make another order and pay off the first one before I'd even, put any of my own money actually into it. But I did have money just in case. And then after that, just kind of like snowballed. I know a lot of my old customers will know I never took pre orders. I didn't believe in selling products that I didn't have in hand. So that kind of stunted growth, I feel like.
Cough
But
Charlie's clones.
Cough Tyler, looking at
Yeah.
you.
Tyler, we
Uh,
see you. We
yeah.
see you. No, just talking
So
shit.
that was May of 2020 when I started, and I bought my Akuma. It's a 2001 Captain, and the salesman was like, "Yeah, the spindle makes a little bit of noise." Knowing what I do, I was like, "Yeah, it's not going to last me long." Turns out it didn't even make a single part. So I think I paid 5,500 for that machine, and then it was another 1,800 to get it shipped, 2 grand to get it moved into the shop, and it's pretty power hungry. Eats up pretty good amount of amperage, and so we had to get a shop with 3 phase. My coworker at the time had a mill around, and we ended up moving that around the corner. We're currently sharing a shop until December, but yeah. So the machine itself was probably the smallest portion of what I actually spent starting to make my own parts. It's so easy to spend a ton of money on tooling, and
Yep.
then uh, the spindle locked up before I even cut a single part. And I, lucky enough, I was still working at the day job, and they gave me employee pricing on all the spindle parts. It's about half off, so I've spent like 6 grand on parts, and for anybody else, it probably would have been 10 grand on labor. So
And I think
it was
that's where
kind of,
your edge comes in.
yeah, it was a mechanic special type deal, which I could have gotten something a little bit more expensive, but I was familiar with the model of machine, and it's pretty solid machine. Not much to go wrong with it besides the spindle locking up, and so. Ooh.
Apparently, Tyler really likes your shop, by the way, with the cars in the background.
Yeah, and I'm surprised Jack was actually able to figure out it was an FC just from the recorder.
That is
There,
impressive.
there's not a lot of FC left to the car right now.
See what I mean? Gun
So
guys, car guys,
yeah,
machinists. It's all. They really go hand in hand a lot of times. Um, so, I mean, you obviously had a good edge, right? You could find a clapped out machine. Let's be honest.
hmm
But you had the ability, of course, with your mechanical knowledge to fix it. And then you obviously had a competitive edge when it came to parts. But for those out there listening right now who maybe want to do something similar, I mean, how hard do you think that is? To find a machine that is
it
going to at least be able to make parts off the bat for a reasonable amount of money for someone like you or I who doesn't have 100K in the bank or down to finance something, with a
yeah
$3,000 $4,000 monthly payment or
yeah. I
more.
mean it's a pretty steep learning curve. There's definitely a ton out there right now as far as like information on helping you learn. There's like John Saunders Machine Works, you know, Titan, Titans of CNC. they both offer a lot of free resources to help you learn, and those have definitely been helpful. But then, just other machinists. There's a lot of guys on Instagram. There's a machinist Discord. Everybody's super helpful. There's some places I would stay away from, like Practical Machinist can be kind of toxic. It's like the ARFCOM of machining.
Oh God.
But yeah, so yeah, there's a
I stay
lot of
away from
information out
ARFCOM
there.
if I can.
I don't think I've ever actually registered. So
I try.
yeah,
I
like
tried actually a couple months ago, and they're like, "You have a proxy server," and I'm like, "So I'm doing this from my work computer. Of course, it's a proxy." Well, you can't register. Like Jesus Christ, it's a fucking forum. God damn. I didn't know I was trying to get like nuclear launch codes or something, but that's
yeah.
ARFCOM for you. I even went as far as emailing them to try to get around it. And then after
hmm
one email, I was like, you know what, fuck this. I don't need to be on ARFCOM.
Yeah, and I feel like they're kind of the way they look at themselves is completely opposite from like everybody in the B team. Like nobody really takes ourselves seriously, but yeah, when we have to do work, we do work. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, so as far as like machines to buy, a good entry machine, the Tormax, they're I know a lot of people that have made a lot of money with them, but I've also heard kind of, the goal of owning a Tormach is to sell it and buy something a little bit better. Uh, I know there's a lot of people that do like isometry jobs, stuff like that with Tormachs and have great success. Uh, Personally, I would go for something a little bit heavier duty, but that's what I'm used to, and I have facilities to support something bigger. Like if I just had this garage here, a Tormach would probably be a good fit. Like you can see my over this shoulder, my little 13-inch engine lathe there.
That's a
It's
manual machine for those who don't know.
yeah, yep, yeah. It's a 13 by 40. It's a three-phase machine, but I put a variable frequency drive on it, so I run it on single phase. So the garage I'm in has 200 or 100 amps of single phase, and
So a typical home panel, basically, right? A
yeah,
100 amp panel.
yep.
You know.
So
And that go ahead, I'm
I
sorry.
don't think I've ever come close to like reaching the limits of it, but you know, it is somewhat limited. Like I couldn't go put my Akuma lathe in here.
So let's ask the age old question, lathe or mill?
Ooh, I am a lathe guy, 100%.
Me too.
Learning, I'm very thankful that Fusion has a very good post for Haas Mills because that's what I have. I guess I haven't talked about that. I think like 6 months after I got the Akuma, I was doing all the facing second operation on my parts in the manual lathe behind me, and they're in two different locations. And so I was like, saw this mill at auction, and it's a Haas Mini Mill. I think it's a 2000 model year, and it's a pretty lightweight machine. It's 4,000 pounds. You can move it pretty much with a pallet jack, and but it's 40 taper. It does everything I've needed it to do so far. It's just pretty limited on size.
And that makes me want to ask this. I mean, for our viewers, of course, we already kind of touched on it, but like the machine is only the starting grounds. And if so, I'd like you to kind of go into okay. So you go on, let's say, an auction, or you find one on Craigslist, let's say, or eBay. You buy a machine. Okay, great. Moving it, installing it, three phase power, tooling, coolant, programs to design and run it. Maybe kind of give people a realistic idea of what we're talking about if they wanted to start a small shop, even if they're going to buy a Tormach. What are we
Yeah.
really talking about here?
Well, so let's go a little bit bigger than a Tormach because
Or a
Tormach,
Haas. Let's go
like,
Haas.
yeah, Tormachs are a couple 100 pounds. You can usually move them like pallet jack for a fully assembled one with a stand, stuff like that. But so yeah, say you buy a Haas like VF2 or Mini Mill, uh, you know, rigging,
How much are you going to pay
even
first off for the
uh,
machine?
shit. Right now, it's pretty expensive. It's not the greatest time to get into buying machines. I paid 10 grand for my mini mill, something about around there. Older. The unfortunate thing is with smaller machines that you're going to be interested in, so is everybody else. So, like all the smaller VF2 size and smaller machines, those are going to have a premium over, say, the VF4, VF6, stuff like that. But right now, 15, 20,000 for a decent used uh, Haas mill, I would say is probably about right. And then depending on where your machine that you bought is, you could pay two, three, $4,000 just getting it shipped to you, and then 1,500 to $2,000 having it delivered to you, having the riggers put it in your shop, and then tooling you can go cheap or you can go expensive, but I've learned my lesson with some of the cheaper tool holders on mills. They've got a fair amount of run out. If nothing you're doing needs a nice surface finish, anything like that, you can get away with a cheaper set of tool holders. But for like
What's the tool
10
holder
tool
cost
holders,
these days for a
yeah.
Haas?
So like Cat 40 on eBay, you can get them like $40 or so each. Something nicer like the Mari Tool hydraulics that Darren got me on. I think those are like $220 each, something like that. So I've got a handful of those. For the mill, I probably have close to $5,000 in tool holders and mills, all that. Work holding's another story.
Oh,
That's
for sure.
gets expensive really quick. So I've
So,
got
so we're looking at. Let's assume you have three-phase power in your facility already. Don't need anything else. I mean, right there, that means your entry level is probably around 30K.
yeah, that'd probably be a
So
decent.
there you go, guys. So for all those people out there on Facebook who are constantly like, I could get my SOT and start a small shop or whatever. I mean, a shitty Haas, let's say that works. Getting it moved. Let's say you rent a shop and rent is $1,200 to $2,000 for a shop with very small footprint, no AC. You also have to assume the floor is acceptable for the weight of your machine. Um,
Yeah, most commercial places will, and if you're getting 4 to 8,000 pound machine, you don't generally have to worry about it. Uh,
you know,
like the guy that I share a shop with, his machine's 16,000 pounds, and even the 5 or 6 inches of concrete in our shop is kind of cracked from it sitting on it.
so I mean that's 30 grand
And
plus your FFL and your
ti
SOT plus
yep,
your
which
rent for
I
your
don't have yet.
shop. Yeah. Plus the materials for your first run. So there's a whatever. Plus your time. So I mean to start a fucking small FFL with one machine. I mean, you're easily looking at needing probably a $50,000 nest egg to do it right, the way I see it at least, unless you just spread it out over time.
Uh,
So that's
to
your
respond to
barrier
Tyler,
to
I
entry.
don't think any Haas is heavy duty. Personal opinion.
Yeah, I don't know that there is. Uh, so what would you say is let's get into brands and machines, and then we'll pivot more into like parts and stuff like that. Um, let's say you were going to buy a brand new machine right now, fairly budget. I mean, Doosan is obviously popular as fuck.
Yeah, they are just dollar to value, like they punch way above their price. Uh, it's I think they're Korean. Somebody's probably going to correct me.
South Korean. South Korean. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Akuma does have some kind of lower, kind of entry level machines. Their Genos line specifically. The Genos mills are, I believe, are still built in Japan, and it's a design that they took their top of the line mill and they're like, how can we make this a little bit more affordable and try and go after the Haas, the Doosan, and it's the Genos M460, 560. They're solid machines. Uh, then their Genos lathes. I think the previous generation was a little lacking. The current one I think is pretty much on par with the Korean machines. And then another thing to kind of consider if you're looking at machines, the control on it, like the computer. There's a lot of options, and there can be pretty significant differences between them. I do feel that's one thing Haas kind of did correctly, is they focused a lot on making their control user friendly, while also ripping off Fanuc at the same time. But uh, yeah, Fanuc machines like the Doosan's. Fanuc, I think, is the largest supplier of CNC controls in the world. They're on pretty much everything. And so if you're going to learn something, you learn a Fanuc, and Haas isn't much different. Akuma's a significant difference. But, I didn't know that until I started messing around with other machines.
Okay. So let's say right now you were in the market for starting a shop, but instead of finding a clapped out used machine, you were going to buy a new machine. Obviously, lathe and mill is going to be different depending on your needs of what you're trying to make. But let's say you were going to start a shop right now. You were going to look for a lathe. Let's assume we're not talking about a twin spindle.
Yeah.
What would you buy for the budget guy?
Like brand new.
Yeah, brand new.
Brand new, I would heavily look at the Doosan's. They're just, like I said, like the value of them is pretty good. Uh, and also, you can get some pretty good financing on those machines, I'm pretty sure.
So you would go Doosan easily over Haas,
mm-hmm.
correct?
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of Haas lathes at all.
Do you hear that, Tyler? Do you hear that?
Tyler doesn't know any better.
No, man, and he's doing just fine with his Haas lathes, that's for sure. And then you got us, over here at Diligent Defense with just a fleet of Haas lathes.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all clapped out Haas lathes, ladies and gentlemen. For those who don't know that, we are the number one buyer probably of used Haas lathes in the country. If you have a good deal on a clapped out used Haas lathe, we will buy it, or mill, and we will fix it, and we will make parts on it better than most people can make parts on it. That is Diligent's fucking thing.
Yeah, don't you have like a Hyundai or something too? I thought there was an older.
I don't even know, to be honest with you. I thought everything we had was Haas at this. Or shit, now I'm saying Haas. Or no, Haas. I mean, god damn it, alcohol's already getting to me. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question because there's what we're at like fucking a lot of machines at this point, which is crazy because it's not like there's a whole bunch of us to run all this shit, right? I'm not there, obviously. Ryan's got a day job. It's pretty much, for those who don't know, just Brandon and we'll call it up to two other people who are running most of the day-to-day stuff. That'll change over time, but you know. But same question I had before on picking a new machine, but now let's say mill. Are you still in the Doosan category?
Possibly. That would be a tough one. Like, I think it would come down to lead time, which is pretty big issue with pretty much everything right now too.
You're absolutely correct.
It, you know, uh, especially the machines coming from overseas. They're last I checked, like Akumas were pretty much sold out until almost the end of the year. Uh, Darren and Riley both had to wait quite a while on both their machines recently on
I
their
think it was
Nissans.
about a year. I want to say it was a year
I don't think it
or
was
more.
quite that long, but
Wasn't? I don't know.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I don't obviously remember the dates, the exact dates they put them in, but it was easily
Yeah,
probably 8 months. I know that much.
yeah. Akuma started doing some kind of interesting stuff on new machines. They were with the chip shortage. They were actually shipping, like building the machine, pulling out whatever boards they knew they didn't have enough of, and then shipping the machine over from Japan. The couple months that it takes for shipping, then get out of the port, they were kind of relying on to
To
establish the
bridge that
yeah, kind
gap,
of catch up on the inventory.
and then ship it
And
by plane, a board, and you would put it in when it
yep,
got there. And
yeah. So it's really fun having to load software on a brand new machine because boards were missing. But
man, I hope things start to get better. I mean, they're starting to get better, at least where I work, but
mm-hmm.
it's never. I don't know how long it'll, if ever, it'll take to get back to normal. Do you think it ever will?
uh, God,
As far as
especially with
supply
all the other stuff.
stuff goes,
Yeah, I
not not
I hope
not
it.
about the economy or fucking our rights, or but just will
Yeah,
we ever have things we can buy easily again?
yeah,
Who
it's a good
knows?
question. Hopefully, eventually, like supply chains catch up. But
So I'm going to pivot to this one right here because I have a comment and you can also answer the question. I want to start off with so Matt at FPM Gunworks in our last like guest live stream talked about how he chose his Hyundai machine because Hyundai was the only brand that was willing to come to him to service the machine and yada yada yada. After that live stream, I did do a little bit of fact checking, not a lot. Maybe Mike has an opinion on this as well, but from what I've been told, that is untrue. That pretty much Doosan or any of the other brands would absolutely come out as well.
oh yeah, you know, we cover. I think I said 3 hours of Omaha for my office in Omaha. Uh, we had Kansas City, we had one in Dallas, one in Houston. There's actually a few times Houston was so far behind, I flew down there for a couple weeks to help them out, and so I know Productivity, the local Haas distributor, they cover about the same amount of area, and then Ellison, it's pretty much the whole country. It feels like I don't. Sometimes it's hard to get a tech out to some of the more remote areas, but
Which he
I
is
don't think
remote in
very
his
many.
defense. That's his
Yeah,
thing.
uh, and also be willing to pay the travel expenses because a lot of people probably don't realize, like, if say a customer 3 hours from here needed service, they're going to be paying my 3 hours of driving there, my 3 hours of driving back. If I take multiple days, they're paying for the hotel stay, and I think drive times a little over $100 an hour, and then close to double that anymore on site. So
Is any
it
of that covered
it's
under
not.
warranty on a new machine?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of new machines have like 1 or 2 year warranties. So
Is there a cap on how many hours that machine has ran and then the warranty expires?
nope, you could run it twenty
Nope.
four
So just
seven for the first year. Yeah.
interesting. Okay. I'm just comparing
Yep.
car warranty versus machine warranty,
Yeah.
So it's interesting that he made that claim. I'm going to have to talk to him now and ask him maybe he got bad information or maybe he just got upsold. he could have had a Hyundai salesman that was the first person who walked in his door, told him a bunch of stuff like, "Hey, Haas isn't going to come to your door. Dusan's not going to come to your door," and he might have believed it, which many people probably
Mm-hmm.
would, especially if you live out in the middle of nowhere, and bought a machine based off that. Um, but I just wanted to basically tell you guys that I don't, at the time in a live, it's extremely hard to fact check things. But I did fact check that one thing because I did find it interesting. And then Tyler bringing up, that he is looking at a Hyundai currently because Tyler's also in that area, just not in a small city. Tyler is in the Fort Worth, Dallas area, where Matt is a few hours, 3 or 4 hours out. I believe three, but outside of that, area of Texas. So they have similar. They're both small shops, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to bring that up. So now why don't you go ahead and try to answer Tyler's question with your opinion?
Which question's that?
Should be on your screen. Looking at the Hyundai currently, so I mean, yes, that's not
Oh,
technically a question, but
yeah.
I think Tyler wants your opinion.
I don't know. I can't say I've ever like even looked inside of one that I saw at a shop. Uh, I yeah, I mean it's a Korean built, generally probably decent quality. They're believe they're FANUC controls as well, and you know it's pretty much the industry standard. So I don't think there'd be many issues with it, uh, but I don't have tons of experience with those. Uh,
Well, there you go. Not tons of experience on Hyundai machines. Tyler, since he's in the market for a new machine, since he's scaling up right now, has been getting a lot of quotes and stuff, so he has a little bit of
mm-hmm.
background. But Tyler's saying that right now there's a 4 to 6 month lead time on Korean machines. So I'm assuming he's talking Doosan, Hyundai. Those are Korean
Yeah.
machines. Um, Okuma's Japanese, correct?
Yes, but the Genos are actually built in Taiwan. The Geno lathes.
Well, my machining background's more manual stuff. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
anything ever made in Japan and even Taiwan, from my experience, at least on a manual machine, is pretty good. So I mean, I can assume that a Taiwan machine gonna work just fine.
Yeah, and like if you're looking at tool holders, stuff like that, if you're going to go cheap stuff, don't go Chinese tool holders. Find at least Taiwanese made. They're 10% more expensive, but way higher quality.
Which gets us back to the
Taylor,
point that tools are important.
Taylor's fuck Mary Kill. I believe I'm gonna have to go with. I'd probably marry Darren. He has been very helpful.
We'll all marry Darren. I think Darren's the
Yeah.
popularist one in the B team.
Yep.
Darren or Nick, we all called Nick our dad.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know.
And then, sorry, Tyler, you're getting killed off.
Oh, you
Riley is
chose
kind of the
Tyler over
most feminine.
Riley. Yeah, Tyler is kind of a little bit more. Tyler's like the Tyler. I'm
He's at
sorry,
least
brother.
slightly more manly.
You know, you've been around explosives, so therefore you are more manly, and therefore Tyler is the dead one. Yep, there it is. We'll toughen Riley up though eventually, won't we?
Yeah.
Just don't feed him. Just don't feed him seed oils. That just went over everybody's head. They're like, "What?" So, for those who don't know, Riley has a very good head on his shoulders for food, and he's very health conscious, and he has a big pet peeve about seed oils and how they're killing everybody. So, we enjoy trying to follow Riley's suggestions for our food intake and give him shit at the exact same time. So that's the background on that.
I think Joe is just giving
Taylor,
Riley way too much credit. I'm pretty sure he just went into like some autistic hole about like healthy foods and found everything about seed oils.
joke on us, he literally Wikipedia that night. He literally probably got on Wikipedia right there and was like, well, how can I fuck with these guys? Oh, seed oils. There we go. Copy, paste. Hey, you fucks, never eat seed oils again. That wouldn't even surprise me.
No.
All right, here's a good one. Has anyone gotten an approved Form 1 since the well, let's just call it what it is. The AFT, you were right. Change their rules again. Well, yeah, man. I've gotten a couple. Many people have gotten them. The kicker is there's two routes to go here. One I would recommend, and the other, personally, I would not, but you're going to have to make that choice for yourself. Um, the big difference here, right, is that they want to know what the fuck you're using. That's what it basically boils down to. And some stuff they consider not to be contraband, and some stuff in an arbitrary, magical way is contraband. You get to not know what is contraband at all. That's just, there's no transparency here. So basically, what it comes down to is you've got to come up with a plan on what you want to build, a lot more than what you normally would. And you've got to not buy any of it. And then you have to basically go, okay, ATF, here's my Form 1. By the way, this is what I want to use for the raw parts, right? I want to buy titanium tubing from Tiger Joe's, and I want to buy, whatever, or maybe you're just gonna machine every single little thing from absolutely raw stock. That's where it gets confusing. Where does the magic line exist? So far, at least for me, I already had a bunch of Form 1s approved prior to all of the nonsense, but I did go ahead and submit a few, at least for me, and a bunch of others have been submitting them. I on one, for example, I'm just going to give you one example. I showed, okay, and I mean, I followed it literally to the T. I'm going to buy 12 inches of titanium tubing from this place. Here's a picture of that titanium tubing. I'm going to buy some freeze plugs from this place. Here's the picture of them on the website. Blah, 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 blah. And I sent it off. I got approved. So where does the line exist? No one really knows, and the only way we can kind of make a basic determination is by seeing what people get approved for. But even then, it's like kind of there's no guarantees, right? But we need people to submit stuff, but then give feedback on what they got approved for or disapproved for. And that's the only way to kind of basically gauge where the line is. The shitty part about the ATF, if you've been dealing with the ATF for the last 30 years, let's say, is this is good today, just like pistol braces. This is good today, but tomorrow they go and change their minds on a whim. So
Mm.
there's no good answer. But basically, if you want to make a Form 1 right now, I would not lie to them. That's another thing some people seem to be doing. Just go, okay, I've got a lathe. I'm going to make everything from raw. I mean, lying to government agencies can get you in just as much trouble as anything else. So, I'm not a legal scholar. This isn't legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. But in my mind, at least, I'm very risk adverse and have no interest in lying. So, that is what it is. So you're just going to have to try, and they'll either approve it or they won't. If they don't, you get your refund, right? So there you have it. Shackdown Sheets says, "Yo, boys, what's up?" Chris has finally graced us with his presence. I don't think he was here last week, so hello, Chris. Yes, tactical buffoonery tons have been approved. So if I'm not mistaken, Chris was in communication with a bunch of people who submitted a lot of Form 1s in a lot of different ways and probably has a deeper background on this part of what's been approved than I do. So you might ask him in private. Chris, do we need to say we're just making parts? Blah, blah, blah. Chris, actually, I was going to have on a live. So if you guys actually want to see that, that's fine since he does have. He talks to a lot of people on the internet all day, just like I do. And here we go. Let's hear more about the RX-7.
Oh god. So it's actually my first car. Uh, I've had it for seven, 17 years. Is that right? Fine. Uh, yeah, so it was a non-turbo, completely bone stock RX-7, and a month after I bought it, on the way to high school, it caught on fire. Uh, like 2 or 3 months later, I got it running again, drove just fine. And then the clutch went out. I took that opportunity to go to a half Bridgeport rotary. It was a high compression. I think it was their turbo irons with the half bridge, and then ran an NA for a while and put a turbo on it. Blew up on the dyno a few months after that, and then I did what absolutely nobody should do and put a Volkswagen VR6 inside of it. And the right there is actually the adapter, the bell housing adapter for a VR6 to a Turbo 400 Chevy transmission. And it was making like 600-ish horsepower before I blew it up. And currently, there's nothing in the engine bay. It's pretty empty in there. But
That's where
the plan
cars go to
is,
die.
oh, it'll. I'm sure my wife's going to agree. Uh, it'll be running hopefully before too long. But it's aluminum 5.3 with a couple 66 millimeter turbos that I'm putting in it, and the chassis that I built for it is 25.3 spec, so it'll be good to 650 in the quarter mile. So the VR6 actually, a couple
Okay,
years
I love
prior
it.
to it actually happening, uh, I had planned to do it, but it was before I had started working on machines, and I had no idea how to actually accomplish it. And so I had an engine, and I bought
How
a
did you
Corrado.
choose a VR6 though? Like, how did your mind go from a rotary to the VR6? Like, there were like five other options in between there.
Because nobody else had done it. And
No one else has swapped a fucking 1.4 liter Volkswagen motor in a RX-7 either, but that doesn't make it a great idea, Mike.
well, so since
Please
I had this
explain your
car,
logic.
I was in Ohio at school, and I made friends with a guy named Kerry. He had the very first VR6 swap Scirocco. He built back in '96. This was like '08, '09. And he hooked me up with a guy who had a Corrado for sale after my DSM got totaled. You'll notice I have absolutely no brand loyalty at all. So sold the DSM after it got wrecked, bought this Corrado, drove it for a while, and then the timing chains let go 3 days before I moved home. So I sold that, and but I had been hooked on the VR6, loved the sounds it makes, pretty torquey motor, and then after I moved back to Omaha, I found another Corrado for pretty cheap, and bought it. Built this VR6 to turbo, and the plan was like to put some slicks on it, kind of go drag racing with it, and then sell it. Well, I misplaced the title, never found it until a year after I got rid of the car. But I pulled the motor, sold the rolling shell to somebody from Colorado. They came and picked it up. So I had a VR6 and I had an RX-7 with a blown motor. So, you know,
Problem
kind of
meets
made
solution.
sense. Right. And I just started at the job, and we had a. It was brand new at the time. It was a hard hinge mill with an Akuma control, really oddball machine, and our applications guy kind of took a few nights and helped me learn how to program, and I drew everything up and made the adapter for the VR6 to the Mazda transmission. Then I got tired of blowing those up with too much torque, so I went to the Turbo 400.
An admirable choice many have made in the world. The Turbo 400 part, not the VR6. I don't know about that. No, and all shit talking aside, I mean, there's plenty of cool VWs, VR6s that have been made in the world. They do hold a pretty decent amount of boost out the with a factory motor. So I mean, it's cool.
Yeah, I only ever ran stock bottom ends on
They're
it.
closed deck, I
And
believe, right? They're a closed
yeah,
deck engine. Yeah.
yep,
So
and
right there, you
super
off the
thick
bat,
head.
especially back in the earlier 2000 mid to 2000s. I mean, you didn't have a lot of closed deck, smaller engines
Right. Yeah,
out there.
it's really compact too. But yeah, the thing that ultimately brought it down was running 30 pounds of boost and spraying a 100 shot. So stock pistons, stock rods, and one of the wrist pins actually like split into three pieces. So, Chris, the rear end in it now is a 9-inch fabricated. Uh, Back the last time it ran, it was actually an 8.8 independent rear out of an Explorer, and the I guess the housing that's in it now is a McAmis that I kind of modified, welded my brackets on, all that, and it's a
So for
4-link setup now.
so let's do this. Hold on. So for those who don't know already, Tyler he got out of the military and he made the sweet choice to spend quite a bit of money on a cheerleader Jeep. And he got this lovely Jeep you see here, button blue in his defense. It did not come with the woman. Uh, but just recently, he is making a tidy sum off of it by selling to someone out of, I believe, the Carolinas who, uh, So at the end of the day, all the shit we give Tyler about his Jeep, he has made a buck. And yes, Tyler, I have seen Chris's Jeep. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. But any opportunity I can get to talk a little bit of shit about Tyler's life decisions are always going to be taken.
Hating on the Barbie
As
Jeep.
well, yeah, as well as anyone else's. Anyone but my own. Please don't talk shit about my own decisions because they're even more awful. Don't you worry. I've had a hell of a week, man. Between my truck getting smashed, now the air conditioning on my house took a shit. I've been arbitratingly going back and forth on that. Fucking work is chaos. I don't know what else can go wrong this fucking week. It's been absolute shit. But
Don't
for
ask that
those,
question because life will answer. And
the
yeah,
I take it back.
yeah.
Knock on this artificial wood. No, but in all seriousness, for those that don't know, I'm a Honda guy, so uh, that's where me and Mike's cohort at least get along. His partner in crime at the shop, and I cut my teeth. One of my first really fast, like truly fast cars was a CRX with a B16 swapped into it with 125 shot on stock internals. It made one single pass on the quarter. It did God, it's been a while, but it was 11 something. I don't remember. I got kicked off the track and I blew that fucking motor sky fucking high.
So I'm really jealous. Up until I think last year is when they made one of the two local tracks into a quarter mile. I grew up the pretty much the only track we've had around here is an eighth mile, and
Ah, that's so boring.
yeah, it got flooded out like probably 6 years ago now, 5, 6. Uh, yeah, it got flooded out, and then couple or around that same time, they were opening up an old airstrip, turning it into a track, and they finally converted it to a quarter mile. So,
So we have a facility here. They did back in like '08, '09, somewhere around there. So they took and built a road course. Then they added airplane hangars. Then they added an airstrip. The airstrip is also a drag strip. And then they built houses where you can buy a house, house your toys, land your plane. So on a weekend, you got all these rich dudes who literally that's what they do. They fly in on their plane, they land, they stay in their house, and then they drag race and road core race and ride dirt bikes and ATVs all weekend. And that's their fucking weekend. Like, what more could you
mm-hmm.
literally want if you're a rich dude who liked outdoor shit like that? Minus a gun range and explosives.
That could be added.
Okay, so two
Yeah.
other things. But still, cool as shit, right? You know, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
god damn, I wish I would have thought of that and had the money to sell people on that. Dude, the B16 was a bone stock B16. Um, After that car, I kept the block was shot too. It threw a rod. It dropped a valve. The valve spit enough junk that it ended up chewing up the surface of all four cylinders. So I mean, a B16 B series head back in like a 2004. I mean, those things were they weren't a dime a dozen, but they weren't like all over the place either. I mean, you had a lot of JDM stuff coming over at that point. But, I kept that head, and remember, I was working in a small machine shop at that point, taking a lot of machining classes in high school, as well as I had literally 3 periods out of my day that was all just auto shop. So I had full access to an auto shop, full access to a machine shop. So did all my buddies, and I mean that's what we did. We fucked off on B series Honda stuff and H series Honda stuff. So from there we built. What did we? What was next? I think the next car I got was it was an older hatchback. I want to say like an '03 or a 2000. Jesus Christ, a '93 or '94. Um, I put an LSV Tech in that, so I did an LSV Tech, I should say. I found a B18 block and I put a different B16 head. That was still basically stock internals. That car ended up selling that. Got a what was next? Oh, I remember. So a friend had done a Accord, a '91 Accord. It had an H22 inch swapped already in it. Ended up putting just like cams and your a few other basic kind of stuff. Actually had it and got it tuned, and that thing was pretty fast because it was a two-door DX, so the DX was the lightest Accord at the time. And that thing was cool. I wish we never got rid of that car. That was a fun car. Me and my buddy Corey, we teamed up on everything. We built just a lot of stuff. From there, I sold that and got a. It was a '94 two-door Honda Accord. This is where I finally started to go big. I did a fully built H22. I had fucking dart and sleeve block, everything. This was my first turbo car in my life. At the time, it was like 650 horsepower, if I remember right. Somewhere it was a six something. I just don't remember the exact number. And that car was the first car that was just like, damn, this thing's fucking fast. That I ended up blowing up the turbo on that car, and it started pissing oil into the exhaust. And I mean, we're at a point in my life where I'm literally in high school, right? And I'm learning an auto shop, so it's not like today where I have a very thorough understanding of, yes, I could rebuild the turbo. I didn't really want to buy another fucking really expensive turbo. I'm literally working, in jobs that are paying me $5 an hour. you know, my other thing was that I was buying and selling a lot of cars and fixing cars. But from there, the coolest and funnest car that I wish I never got rid of. Um, there's three basically, but one of them was a habanero red. I had it painted habanero red, and it was an EK hatch. I put a JDM Type R B18 in it. Just did different. I did just literally cams, a lot of suspension work. Because I mean, I don't know how familiar you guys are with this kind of stuff, but getting front wheel drive cars to hook up is tough, and just getting them to hook up is going to be a lot better than trying to a lot of times put more power down. But that car literally was so cool, and I sold it for a lot of money. and and then my favorite Honda, I still literally have it in the garage to this day. It's a 2000 Civic Si, and
It,
I love the coupes. I
it
love the
better
2000
be
Civic
electron blue
coupes.
plural.
It's red, bro. It is red. But my
Oh,
buddy had a
gross.
blue one. I like red. What can
That
I
is the
tell you? I
only
don't know
color
what to
to
tell
get.
you. But I smashed
Yeah,
it, so
so
I got an accident and smashed, and it's been in my garage, salvage title for ever since.
that was the wrist pin on the number 6 cylinder of the VR6.
Uh, I
Just
always
completely
use
shattered it.
D16 trainings or GSR trainings. By the way, Chris, I tried to never use LS trainings, but my buddy, I mean, we've used LS trainings and so. I mean, so those were my cars, right? But Corey would build cars. Um, Another friend of mine, Cameron, was really into Hondas, and then my buddy Todd was super into cars, but he always tried to go with like Nissan. So like we built an SR20 DET Sentra at the time. We built a 240. I mean, we teamed up, right? Like we had a team of dudes, and we just built fucking cars, and that's what we did. But anyway, sorry, Mike.
Oh, you're fine. I think the one car I regret getting rid of the most is before my wife and I were even dating. She road tripped with me to go deliver an FD that I owned to the new owner. I never drove it. I bought it. It was an auto blown motor, and came with a good condition motor, manual transmission, everything to swap the 5 speed into it. And I just never got around to it. So I sold it, and then now I probably could have gotten quadruple the price if I kept it,
Yeah.
because those things are just
Uh,
skyrocketing.
Chris is calling me out, so I have to kind of defend myself here for a second. First off, it was a 125 shot. It was on drag slicks, so I mean, again, front wheel drive hooking up, and it was at the fuck's the track here in town. SIR. It was at SIR, and it was yellow. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, man. I mean, that's what it clocked it at. So I got kicked off the track. I wasn't allowed back either. So there you go. I mean, I had no reason to make up my fucking slip. But anyway, go on.
Tyler's dumping money into a Jetta.
What? I haven't heard this. Tyler, tell us. I know he just bought a Taos. He just bought a first model year Taos, and I tried to tell him not to, but he did. Never buy a first model year vehicle.
I actually just bought a Jetta like 2 or 3 months ago. So,
You did?
yeah,
How many cars is that? 12?
11 between my wife
Oh,
and I.
I wasn't that far off.
Yeah.
Tell us what you got. You might as well.
Well, and it's nothing special. It's an '03 GLI, and my wife has a. Ooh, Tyler, what year is your GLI? My wife has a Corrado that's currently a G60, and Buddy made me a really good deal on this GLI, so figure I can swap the 24 valve VR6 and 6 speed into the Corrado whenever I'm done driving the Jetta. It's not super clean, it's a little rusty, a little beat up, but uh, currently I've got my daily is actually a '07 BMW 5 Series, and probably getting rid of that before it goes too far downhill on me.
My car that I wish I never would have gotten rid of recently in the last, say, 10 years is I had a. What the fuck is it? What year was it? I want to say an '04. Now I'm drawing a brain fart because I've talked about so many cars. Or an '02. I forget, but it was a four-door Jetta with a TDI, an ALH motor, not the Pumpadoo's, diesel. And I mean, I really enjoyed that vehicle. That thing ran, first off, those run forever just in general. 330,000 miles and literally not a fucking problem to it. They're very torquey. Driving a diesel passenger car is very different than driving a gas car. And I mean, I liked that little car. It was perfect as a daily driver, and I wish I never would have gotten rid of it. A little older, but still, it wasn't like in bad, and like the interior was perfect. It didn't have anything crazy like electronically, but who gives a fuck?
Yeah, some of the
So
other cars I currently have, I have a '74 Mazda RX-4 wagon, and then a '76 Mazda Cosmo. And the Cosmo, the previous owner bought for his daughter and repainted it, got it looking all nice, got it all fixed up, and this was in 1990. She decided it was not a cool enough car for her. She would rather drive a Pontiac Sunfire. So he parked this car in the storage unit, and it has been sitting there for the past 32 years.
well, Tyler's apparently going to fix up his Jetta.
I agree with Chris. Tyler just needs to sleep in the shop, live there, and make all those cans that he's contracted for now.
Yeah, right. I mean, the worst part of like, okay, you've made and designed a great can. The data comes out and it supports that completely, and then you get all these people go, okay, well, where can I buy it? But there's only so many, right? So he's got to scale up. That's probably Tyler's biggest problem right now. Is he's got to scale it all up to meet all that demand, and that's not a bad problem to have. So congratulations, Tyler. That's not a bad problem to have at all. But we've gotten off topic pretty far here, and we've stopped
It
talking
happens.
about you. Um, One of the things I wanted to touch on in this video was the future, right? And what is Dino Precision's future? What are you trying to do, sell, make, all of
Yeah,
that?
so uh, Dino's future is probably going to be more the accessory type market. Uh, if I were to come out with, something that maybe would require FFL SOT, it would likely be under a different brand. But what I've been working on, uh, so I've got some mag extensions for CZs. A little hard to see there. But been working on these pretty heavily. Currently trying to get Glock ones developed, 17 and 19, because it was news to me. They actually use a slightly different angle magazine. Uh, so you can't just and you can, but it's not the best way of doing it. Use the same extension on both the 17 and 19. And then uh, I've also, if anybody's been on my website lately, do some powder coat parts. These are kind of a hopper kit. Friend that shops right near mine is like, hey, you know, there's nothing on the market that's actually metal and solid. A whole bunch of 3D printed ones, and they break all the time. Just wanted something nice and not going to break, so I worked on those with him.
But
And
what are they?
so they powder coat hopper, basically like a plastic jar, and the long piece goes into the gun itself that you spray out of, and then the other one is kind of like fluidizes the powder and just helps it swirl and get into the gun a little bit more efficiently.
Can they be used on things other than powder coating hoppers, like
Uh,
regular paint or?
no, because like powder, you need air flowing through to kind of swirl the powder, make it more of a fluid. Otherwise, it just kind of clumps and the gun doesn't spray very smoothly. And if you've ever seen something that powder coated and kind of clumpy or really thin, it's probably because their hopper was not flowing as well. A Bravo
Tyler
Trilug.
requests that you make a Bravo Trilog. Now I can. Hold on. Let me think here. RS9 is Bravo threaded. There must not be any Trilogs out there for that. I'm assuming. Maybe YHM. Does YHM make a Bravo Trilog?
It would surprise me if they didn't. I think
I think it's all
Darren
AR
is
Alpha.
way better suited.
Yes,
I
this
know
is his
Darren's pretty
area.
far behind as it is.
Yeah, he really can't take on more products right now.
Yeah. And
Yeah, see, only
only
YHM.
YHM.
Damn, I got it. Called that shit.
Uh, so I guess here's the one of the first Glock ones. It's not even finished. Uh, Still has
Oh,
first
let me go
operation
big
work
screen.
holding there. Yeah.
Let me go big screen for you. There you go.
So that's first one for Glock. Half finished. Still need to do the second operation. Cut all that off, make it pretty. But hopefully, end of next week, I'll actually be putting some rounds through them. And I brought a few different variations of the CZ ones. Kind of showing a little bit of difference, like as I was developing it. 3D printing is a fantastic technology for prototyping. You don't have to worry about trying to make a program that actually works. You just kind of draw it and then print it, and it prints. So that's been one of my favorite additions to the shop within the past year or so.
You make a good point because there's no tool pass in 3D printing.
Yeah, you just put in a slicer and it does everything for you. So, some of the other things I know a lot of people probably already know. So, my original Meteor, and then this is the Meteor V2. See, it's a little bit bigger. Ports
What
are a
is
little bit
different?
more open. A little bit longer, more open ports. Uh, and currently, I only have the 5/8 24 on the version 2 because after I made them, my lathe got tied up doing parts for the other company. So haven't had much time to work on getting some new ones out. But whenever things slow down, that's my plan.
Or a Bravo internal booster like Silencer Co, but not gay, and include a piston. Well, first off, Silencer Co's piston, I completely agree. You don't want to buy that. Which pretty much leaves rugged or Nix pistons for the only pistons out there, and a Silencer Co pattern that you do want to buy, unless you like leaky pistons. But yeah, man, why don't you get into more like mounts and stuff? I mean, that's a good point because there are accessories out there that don't exist that people would want.
Yeah, I feel like Nick probably makes a lot of the stuff. People just don't realize it. Like, the amount of SKUs that he puts out is incredible. Like, I don't know how he does it. Especially, like, when he sends mount conversions.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
he works a lot of hours in the day, that's
yeah.
for sure. But still, that's kind of the point, though, right? Like, he puts out a lot of stuff, but I don't know if you've noticed, though, like, he'll come out with a batch of stuff, right?
Hmm.
But there might be a month or two, like, and it'll sell out in a few days. And there might be a month or two, though, before he can get to another batch of that same SKU.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's clearly room without even touching Nick's inventory
Hmm.
for more. And then I guarantee you, though, like Tyler's saying, there are some things that exist that he is not making that people would want. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that might be a good area for Dino to get into. By the way, you say Dino really weird, but it's one other thing.
Well, it's a dinosaur.
Damn, you made a great point right now. Damn, that's heavy, Mike. That is heavy. Dinosaur. I'm
That
gonna
was
have to chew
actually
on
my
that.
wife's idea when I was trying to come up with a name. That was all her. I think you actually had her comment up a little bit earlier, but yeah, she
Oh, we
gets
should
credit
have
for
got
naming.
Christina in this.
She's in chat.
Oh, okay. I didn't even notice.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. So, oh yeah, other things. This, I think I've had this thing made for, God, I don't know how long. It
It's been
is
a
a
while.
closed front A2 flash not hider. It does an awful job hiding flash, but you know,
What? Everyone
yeah.
says the A2 is amazing.
Well, so the problem is I wanted a closed front because I wanted something sacrificial,
And that
and
changes
turns
everything.
out, oh yeah. So what I really want to do is port the front end, but keep the face fairly significant, and maybe see if I can help out the flash a little bit without, completely obliterating first baffles. So,
Well, and that kind of brings me to a point. Anyone who still thinks that not using a brake before your first baffle is not beneficial, get with the program. I mean, I don't know if I should show it or not, but just this week, let's just say we had somebody in our group who had a customer who pretty much obliterated their first baffle on their titanium can because instead of using a brake, which was recommended on 10-inch 5.56, they went to a flash hider, open front flash hider, and it didn't take much to pretty much chew that titanium first baffle up. And it wasn't like it was a big, or I should say, it wasn't like it was a very small blast chamber, but it wasn't a very big one either, about 2 inches. So you still have about half of an inch of gap. So, guys, brakes do save baffles. That it's time and time again.
so with Andrew's like 4 3/4 D60 test, I would be really curious to like put a flash hider versus just a 2 or 3 port brake, like
Yeah,
just to show the difference on the first baffle. I think it'd be
he's
pretty significant.
he's he's predominantly done his testing direct thread, but there has been a few
Hmm.
cans by nature of the built-in mount. For example, Thunder Beast, things of that nature, rugged, and those cans have ended up using a brake. And of course, those cans have fared much better, though blast chamber has played a part in that as well.
Hmm.
But Tyler would like to call Nick out and say his stuff is heavy. Some tough
I only
words.
have, I think mine's an alpha threaded booster from him, and it's not very heavy, but there's also not much there. So
I was gonna say
I
my
would like to
booster
call
housings
out
from him
Torrent.
aren't bad.
I know I've posted in group, but the Torrent booster is quite possibly the biggest pile of shit I have ever held in my hand, and it weighs like almost 6 ounces or something. It is ridiculous. If I was
I
on my
want to
other
know who
computer, I
buys
would
their
actually know.
cans. Do you know anyone who owns a torrent suppressor?
I do not.
Neither do I. Come to think of it,
Yeah, it
you
had
know,
like an O-ring groove with no O-ring in it.
that's funny. Well, the gyro. Are you talking about his mount plus the gyro, or are you talking about the built-in one? I mean, yeah, it's heavy because he doesn't have any relief on the mount part. I think I have one right here. Hold on.
Is that his like helical uh, brake?
Yeah, yeah, it's the helical one with the direct thread mount.
Yeah, there's a lot of meat there. I can see that. I'm really, I'm really excited to see what he does with his new machine. He just picked up an older Mazak Integrex, which is basically like a 5-axis lathe.
I mean, he puts quite a bit of porting. It's all deep. I mean, I don't know how much more you could pull out of this. I mean, you could probably pull some out if you wanted to get really aggressive with it, but I don't know. I mean, just by nature of what it is, it's constrained quite a bit, but you could probably not go as thick on the outside part, and I don't know. Yeah, but 17.4, you can only do so much.
Um, oh yeah. Something else. I've only prototyped, haven't actually cut anything, but that this one's kind of broken. But very first prototype of a comp for Canic. So
Canic always needs more love.
yeah, they're entry level guns. They're not bad. Uh, Trigger is fantastic, but I think the worst part about Canics are most of the other owners.
I've got one. I bought one because I was curious. I'll be honest with you. It's been a perfectly adequate piece. It's a little heavy. The slide's a little heavy, but
I mean, it's
I
a
mean,
P99 clone. That's basically all it is.
I've been perfectly happy with mine, especially since I've gotten some trigger stuff that I've put into it and all that. I went with a little bit lighter guide rod because they're a little oversprung, but
Mm-hmm. Is yours not
it's
the executive combat?
this
I was thinking
is
it was.
an SF Elite.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I
I
bought this
really
thing a
like
while
the
ago.
flat face trigger on the ECEs. So
I want to say I got the trigger shoe itself is I want to say a Taylor Freelance, which I mean, when I did this, there was nothing out there. Like Taylor Freelance was pretty much it, you know.
Tyler, it's this one. So Shadow 2, you know, nothing too special. I basically don't have anything done to it, just the brass lock grips. But shoots really nice. But this is my wife's favorite.
The Parrot.
And speaking of Nick and Echo, this piece, as far as I know, the only like checkmate in the world that has a half 28 threaded barrel.
And
And
that wasn't easy to make.
no, he said if he never has to make one again, he would be happy. So I'm sure the Intergrex would make it a lot easier, but still not a very fun piece to make. Trigger is a little bit of take up, and that's it. And it's only like 2.5 pounds. So, yeah, that is one of my favorite guns. Definitely Christina's favorite, especially shooting suppressed.
Yeah, you brought her over to the dark side.
Yeah, it definitely gets some looks at the range too.
I would, if out of any of the guns you own, that is one I would really actually enjoy shooting because that would be very different.
Oh yeah,
And I bet
like
I
it
bet
is
it
such
shoots
a
really well.
smooth, and I almost only shoot Syntec 150s through it. Like it's almost cheating. It's just butter smooth, stupid quiet. Sounds like a like staple gun. So
Speaking of Syntec
movie quiet.
150s, oh, now you sound like an extremely popular YouTuber we will not name.
Anybody that simped for
Uh,
Tyler?
what? No, I was playing. No, it's funny. Uh, Syntec
Uh,
150s, by the way. I got some Syntec 149s, right? Or no, I'm sorry,
147s.
145s? 147s, thank you. Wow, brain fart. Honestly, they sounded pretty good. So it seems like the 147s not too much different than the 150s, though I would definitely still stick with the 150s because the 150s are just amazing. It's kind of crazy how good they are for a off the shelf brand of
Yeah,
subs. I mean, not even purposely built subsonic, but
right.
subsonic
They're
ammo.
built for power factor, really. So
Yeah, yet they're so good.
yeah, I really want to try shooting some major through the parrot, but uh,
Let's talk
Taylor,
about.
Taylor, I still need to make this into something not just a giant block of steel before I try a P320. So I do plan on or would like to get into slides. Right now, my machine's not capable enough to go from scratch, so it would just be kind of more aesthetic cuts on a blank. But if I get another different mill that's more capable, I would definitely love to go from scratch and see what I can put out.
Speaking of from scratch, I mean, does is there a material supplier that sells a lot of blanks in the 320? Like, can you get, let's say,
I don't.
300 blanks?
I'm not really sure. I haven't actually looked into that yet. Uh,
Hmm.
I just really am not a fan of my mill as it is, so I would like something made a little bit more recently and with more travel than what mine has. Because I only have, I think it's 12 by 18 inches of table and 10 inches of height. And between the tool and the part, that's eaten up pretty quickly.
For those who know Boogeyman Customs, big into Glocks. I mean, they literally started from the back of his house here in town. I was one of his first kind of, hey, you should do this and this and this. He had literally just a CNC conversion manual mill, and
Mm-hmm.
we came up with a couple designs that we personally wanted on our own guns. And then before you know it, I mean, he's taken off into the monster he is today. Uh, so I mean, that market is pretty saturated, but yet they have their books pretty much closed quite often. And so there appears to be enough demand, even though there's a lot of different places that make slides, that you should be able to find success in slides too, as well as many other things. I would personally, though, make things that, you know, maybe people have trouble getting, but that's me. I always love to see a niche get filled. But you also have to have that bread and butter product
Yeah,
that pays the
and
bills.
so there's a book that actually talks about it's Red Ocean, Blue Ocean, and I haven't actually read it, but I've heard quite a bit of the synopsis. Like basically, like Red Ocean, I believe is kind of cutthroat market. There's a lot of competition out there, but the market's there. You don't have to teach your customers like why you need this part. But the blue ocean is, you come up with a product that nobody else has, then you have to teach your customers why they need your product and kind of establish your own market. And it's surprisingly actually easier to get into a red ocean market than you the blue ocean.
Hmm.
That kind of goes along like that was more or less my first product line. I started because I was actually looking at Ryan and Brandon, and I was like, these guys never have shit in stock. Like, I have connections. I can draw something, get it made, and then sell it. And, you know, that's kind of what gave me the push to decide to start Dino.
That makes sense. Actually, you make a really good point. I never really thought about it that way. The whole red and blue thing, and the whole teaching people why they should acquire something they might not understand that they need. That's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Um, One of the things I wanted to ask you tonight, which no one's asked, is how. And again, this is because I don't know how if everyone kind of understands how things are made and how they get to be what they are. But how does an idea become a machined product, start to finish?
As somebody who has their own machine, or like when I first started,
Yeah.
like
Well,
I don't
I mean,
have my own
obviously, you can.
capabilities.
Let's assume you have your own machine, or let's just assume that if you don't, you can easily contract out and get the product in. Let's. But
Yeah,
how does?
I
Let's
mean,
say you have to design it, you have to come up with it, you have to do all the legwork, you have to pick the material, you have to, you know, kind of go into what really is actually involved in manufacturing just one single part, because I think a lot of people go just add another SKU, just get another part, just whatever, or make more of a part you already make, but it's very easily said than done.
yeah. I guess I could walk through one of my mag extensions.
There you
So
go.
you know, I obviously had all the prototypes earlier, uh, but so this actually starts as about well, I don't know if I've got like 1 3/4 long, 1.5 tall, 1/4 inch wide chunk of aluminum, just square bar, like solid material, and I buy it pre-cut into whatever size I specify, and then uh, I've got to do the first operation, which is actually usually called op zero. It's a preparation, so it is cutting that little dovetail into it and that little notch in there, and that's what allows me to hold onto it securely on my rotary.
Which
And
brings up a
then
good point.
yeah,
You've got to be able to hold the work you're going to work on.
right, yeah. Previously, before I had the rotary, I actually had to move each part to 7 different locations. on or 7 different fixtures, and it just allowed so much error. And I still made good parts, but it took me a long time to be able to make a good part. Uh, so with the rotary, I basically just prep the material, put it on my fixture, and then program it in. I use Fusion 360, and a lot of people think the software does a lot of the work for you. It does a fair amount of the work, but you still have to know what you're doing. What tools you're using, what kind of feed, and how fast to run it. And that's been, aluminum's pretty forgiving, but it doesn't really stand up if you're stupid, which I've broken quite a few end mills. Uh, so you do the first operation for that little dovetail. Second operation basically gets it to this point, and then the third operation, you have to get a little creative on a part like this because you don't want to mar up the outside surface that everybody sees. That's pretty much the only critical surface on the part. Tolerances on these are pretty loose. So I actually built a little expansion fixture that fits perfectly inside here and holds it. You tighten a little bolt, it spreads out, and you can actually cut all the outside of this off and then put all the texture that I like to put on it, make it nice and grippy. And then you have to find somebody to coat them. These are Cerakoted by a friend of mine who actually just recently started his Cerakoting business. He has experience working for other people Cerakoting, but decided it was time to branch off on his own. So it's Omaha Custom Cerakote is his website and business. But then the last part is this little back piece, and I thought about injection molding, uh, thought about maybe machining them out of aluminum, but these are actually professionally 3D printed, and they are PA11 polymer. They snap in nice and solid. Takes quite a bit of force to actually pull it out, several pounds at least, and takes some trial and error, some actual like drawing it up, calculating, figuring out what you need. But that's where the for all the prototyping, all the 3D printed parts come in handy. Then I think I had the shop print me. I think this is the third design I actually had them make for me before it actually fit as well as I wanted it to in there. It fits pretty well, no real gaps, follows the contours. And the thing about it is it's very consistent in how it moves, but it does move. It doesn't print exactly to size. So a few of the dimensions are like a couple thousandths over or undersized from what it actually should be in order to make it fit how it needs to. So
So while you did an excellent job right there explaining all that, you even still, I mean, I think you simplified even some of that. Even, I mean, you got to have an idea, you got to have a, an understanding of, first off, even just regular CAD. You have to have an understanding of, tolerances and dimensioning things. Then you have an idea, right? You draw something up, but you draw it, and you can draw anything, but you have to know that what you're drawing can actually be made, right?
mm-hmm.
I mean, the limitations of what machines you own or have access to, that plays a huge part. And
Definitely.
then okay, so now you've gotten to this point where you've made some sacrifices maybe and what you wanted to make versus what you can potentially make. And then like you've been doing, you then prototype it. Now you're prototyping with 3D printing, which makes things, you know easier for sure, and
Hmm.
that's probably the
And
biggest.
it's very helpful to actually be able to like put something in your hands and have something tangible to feel. Like especially with something. Uh, Hi, Christina.
Hi, Christina.
Uh, yeah, something like a magazine extension where you really want it to be a tactile feeling, uh, like the all that texturing I mentioned on the bottom there. I think I went through 3 or 4 pieces of material just facing it off and then putting a different step over, facing it off, putting a different step over until I got something I was actually happy with. And my original ones didn't even have that. It was this really lame like dot matrix style that almost everybody else uses and felt way too slick. It also took twice as long to cut all that as the texture does, so got rid of it. But with these 3D printed parts, let's see if I can. You can kind of see this was one of my very early ones. It's got the groove across the front matches the ones on the side. Well, that doesn't really feel right when you grab it. So I tried adding a little bit different. I was like, that feels a little bit better, but the other one's kind of redundant then. So that's where I kind of came up with the basis for where I'm at, and I wanted to add the texture there. And some things are easier to do on the machine than it is in 3D modeling, surprisingly. And so you can see that actually has kind of a knurling effect inside there. It gives you just a little bit extra so it's not really slick. But yeah, so just being able to put your hands on something. I had this one that was just completely awful. You can see I got it way too thin for the printer to even register as a wall there. But then, you know, really thick. Just did not feel great at all in your hand. So,
And these are parts that you don't even really have to. I mean, eventually you're going to shoot them for sure, but like, it's not like, you know, something that you've got to put hours of like testing on an actual firearm, right? So that even adds a
right.
whole nother layer of complexity. I mean, we're literally talking about something I think that most people are probably going to overlook as it's just a mag extension, right? How hard could that be?
Yeah,
And
and there you got to make sure it's actually one going to function, not going to bind up. The Glock ones are actually a little bit more difficult for that. The CZ magazines are pretty basic shape. And then, like with that 3D printed backplate, I had to make sure that it's not going to just like, if you drop a loaded mag just right on the corner, a lot of force is actually pushing that backplate out. So I had to make sure that polymer is actually going to be tough enough. And then a lot of the difference was like, kind of see those little grooves in there and make sure that the arm is wide enough to provide enough snapping force that it's not just going to slide in and out when you don't want it to.
so now you've got a product, right? Like you've 3D printed it, you've gone through all these evolutions, but so far all you've had to do is print it, which we already know is easier than changing something into going from a CAD design all the way to G code, right? So
Yeah.
explain that process, that part of the process.
I That's where Fusion does a lot of the heavy lifting. You still have to know kind of what type of toolpath you want. And like I said before, you need to know like what your end mill will actually be able to handle. Uh, and some of it's you know the default values work for some stuff, and other times they really trip you up. You're like, I swear I changed that value, but when you put it in the machine, it just snaps the end mill right off. And you're like, oh well, that was $100 gone. Uh, yeah, so it's basically just picking the toolpath and then simulating it, make sure it looks good on the computer before you actually send it over to the machine. And then I've learned my machine's 20 years old. It doesn't use USB. It the Haas doesn't even have a floppy drive. I have to communicate with RS-232, which is basically just two wires, a send and a receive. Very susceptible to noise, and I've learned a few tricks to help out with that. But the other day, it actually, instead of sending like a Z2 point something, it sent over a Z0. So the tool actually just plunged straight down, like 150 inches a minute, really fast feed, and just wrecked a lot of stuff. So welded aluminum to steel. That's always fun. Shattered the end mill, damaged one of my dovetail fixtures, knocked everything out of alignment. So I just spent a few hours fixing everything up, making it, you know, get it all back into alignment. And yeah, after that, there's always minor tweaks you can make, whether it's to try and save cycle time, which one of my favorite things about lathe work is you can almost always improve cycle time. There's some times where it doesn't make sense, like, you're running 5 parts. If it takes 10 minutes per part, who cares? You know, you can do other stuff while it's running. But like these magazine extensions, they actually take me, each one is about 15 minutes from start to finish per part. And I can have 8 of them on the machine at one time. So if everything's set up, everything's working right, I can run for 2 hours straight without me actually messing around with the machine. I can actually get that time down. I haven't worked on cycle time on that, but that cycle time's not really my limitation for it right now, so I haven't bothered with it. So
Mhm. That's great. I mean, that I hopefully that kind of gives people a little bit more of an idea of what it takes just to make a single product. Because now imagine all of this, but going to something complex like a full rifle or a suppressor every bat, and then why don't we see, like some people, why don't we see progressive spacing in X can or Y can or Z can? And it's like, is that little, is the benefit you might gain worth the complexity of adding all this extra stuff, you know? And that's just one of many examples you can talk about, but, there's so much more that
yeah,
goes into making this stuff than people realize.
yeah, if you're talking about making a full can, just from a manufacturing aspect, like I don't know how many Tyler's RSP or RS9 have, but like you have 8 or 9 baffles in it. I know Tyler has one of his cans has 2 different materials, and
There's
so
at
he's
least
got to
4 different
switch.
baffles in an RSP, I believe.
Yeah, and he's got one machine. So I'm sure there's some setup changes, tooling changes between the aluminum and the 17.4. Uh, Although I wouldn't put it past Bradley to just use the same tools on some of them.
Burn! That was fun.
Now, uh, yeah, like it, all the changing of parts, like Tyler's cans are actually fairly complex, and the number of different parts involved with it already is pretty high. If you add another like 5 different baffles in there by changing spacing, like that would just be that many more part numbers you have to stock. That many, you know, say you run one baffle style a day. Well, you went from, I don't know for sure how many Tyler has, but say like 8 pieces for one can. If you run one part number a day, you're almost at 2 weeks already. You add another 5, you're at 3 weeks. And it just adds up a lot. Once you get into higher numbers, it makes a little bit more sense that you can do it, but production wise, like, you know, quantity definitely saves you some money and time. And then there's also being able to, you have to keep those sorted all the way from production to assembly. And if you don't have them labeled anywhere in between there, you know, some of the bigger, the guys that are making thousands of cans a year, there's just so much more room for error and issues like that. So,
Sure. I mean, let's stick with the RSP, for example. You've got an end cap, you've got a piece of tubing that has to be machined, um, you've got a blast chamber section that has to be machined. That blast chamber section has um, at least, let's see, from the piston, the spring, there's a seat, uh, there's a
the glue.
retainer. Uh, then you've got the cap to hold it all together. And then now, only now, so we're at 8 right now, and we haven't even gotten into baffles.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have the distal baffles that are shorter. We're going to have the mid baffles, which are a little longer. We're going to have the baffle that transitions from the normal baffles to the coax. We're going to have the coax baffles. So, I mean, we're at least fucking, 14, 15 part numbers. So that's
Yeah.
15. Let's say if you run one part number a day, that's 15 days just to make the raw parts.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got nitride, Cerakote, depending on the type of can, welding, or just
Piano.
general assembly, assembling the
Mm-hmm.
blast chamber sections. You and then you've got to send a lot of that stuff out to have those surface finishes done. So let's say you're going to do a batch of 1,000 cans. That can be easily a month or more of time.
Oh yeah, yeah. 1,000 would probably be a couple months for, especially like Tyler with one machine. Uh, so like back before I stopped selling the previous product, I had actually planned on moving into, like I said, a bigger shop, but I also had almost completely worked out a deal to buy two more Kuma lathes. Similar model to what I have, but with a sub spindle. So it would have been slightly less like work for the mill. And my plan with that was I was going to just keep one machine per material because the parts I was making for my entire product line, there were two tools that I really needed to change out, and both of them were drills. Like everything else stayed the same as long as the material was the same. So I spent a lot of time trying to get the programs dialed in to make as many parts as possible I could an hour because I was working full time and making parts on the side. So I know Christina will attest, like, there are some weeks I probably spent like 50, 60 hours down at the shop on top of my day job. Sometimes the timing kind of overlapped, but the nice thing about that job was there was a lot of flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, like making that style of part on a single spindle machine, it was moving pretty good to try and get it done as quickly as I could. I think most of my parts ended up being a little under 3 minutes. So
Yeah. Tyler, if yeah, we're gonna go to Suppress Fest. We weren't originally, but that ended up happening. Well, one of the big goals I wanted to do tonight was kind of give people a better idea of, how do you get into this stuff, and what it really takes to come up and think about and make a part and and get a part to even just made, and all that. So I think we've done a really good job. Um, I don't personally have anything else. I don't know if you guys do. If you do, go ahead and drop the questions below. It can be anything, but if not, then I think we're probably at a decent place where we can probably wrap this up.
yeah,
Unless you have
yeah.
something else you want to go into.
Uh, no, I mean, one of the things that's really been helpful for me, like at least taking the more recent plunge of quitting my day job and trying to do this full time is just like having financial stability. I know a lot of people don't, and I like financially I'm very risk averse. I'm pretty sure you are too, but
Unless you're buying
just
Gap or something like that.
well, like I think 4 years ago, I think was the last time I actually had a car loan. The only debt between my wife and I is the mortgage right now. So just having that foundation, like, I had pretty healthy savings, and I've gotten her like on board with having decent savings, and you know, just having that financial stability to be able to take a plunge. Like, hey, I'm just gonna quit my job and see what happens over the next 6 to 10 months, and it's been a big relief not having to split my time between two different things. I I know it might not seem like I've done a lot. A lot of it's just been learning behind the scenes, like trying to better myself to be able to make products in the future.
Yeah, I don't. Again, I mean, a lot goes into this that most people aren't going to, see, and that's fine. And that's part of, again, why I wanted to ask some of the questions I asked tonight, so people could get some background into that. Financial stability is unfortunately the name of the game. You want to go out and you want to start your own small business, no matter how you cut it, it does take that. It takes capital and the ability to risk doing it, and that's not easy.
Yeah, and I mean it. There are people that can go out and like take investments or take a loan and start the business that way. Uh, you know, personally, a personally backed business loan was not something I was interested in. I could have done it, but you know, for some people, they're way less risk averse and able to, you know, just sign that dotted line and buy a brand new machine, lease a shop. Might not have any money coming in for the first several months, but uh, yeah, like I felt it was a big leap for me when I was making, had my day job and I was making decent amount of money selling parts to just buy the machine on my own and then sign a 1 year lease at the time. Uh, Coming up in December, the lease on the current shop is up that I'm sharing with Tim, and so then we're going to go our separate ways. I'm moving a whole block and a half away, and going to more than double the amount of space I have for myself. Going to try and maybe get some cars in there. There's some automotive parts I'd love to manufacture, but a lot of development stuff like that. And then, I'll have room for maybe a bigger mill in the future if I come across one I want. I also have
Um,
a few new tools showing up before too long. I've got a nice Miller Synchro Wave welder showing up hopefully next week. A laser engraver I've been looking at for a while. I'll probably be pulling the trigger on. That's all stuff for the future.
Assuming everything works out the way it's planned at the moment, are you going to make suppressors?
I would love to. I'm not going to say yes, I will. However, that is definitely on the list of things that I would like to do. It will not be under Dino Precision. Don't know what brand it'll be under, but it'll be under the same roof as Dino Precision, and still me. So
I know you and I have talked in private, but there's a bunch of ideas that I think would be pretty cool, and I think the community as a whole would like. So I'm very much so looking forward to seeing your future success. Let's
yeah,
put it at that.
thanks. And I know, I said my old products aren't coming back. However, you know, I do have a plan on something in the future if I do make cans that there might be some similar things appearing, uh, to support my former customers, stuff like that.
Clint would like an all access pass to any machinery, apparently, and that he has a Scion TC, and his dad had a 78 AMC with a 360 and a 4 speed. So we've again
Nice.
have a love of cars
Different.
and guns, and
Yeah.
guns and
I kind of
cars
wish
just
I
seem to go hand in hand.
I kind of wish I had a little bit better internet down at the shop. It's like 20 minutes away from here, but you know, could actually show the machines instead of just this jungle gym sitting behind me.
Yeah,
So
hopefully in the future we can do especially when you get in the new shop, we can do
yeah,
a show wall or a tell wall or something. Maybe you can show how a part from work holding to tool selection. I mean, that would be cool. I think that's some of the stuff that's really missing from the narrative in a lot of the stuff.
yeah. I still would consider myself a very beginner, especially on the milling side of things. Lathe side, like the little bit that I have experience with, I feel like I've gotten pretty good experience. But you know, just the number of tool selections out there, you could spend months just going through every single tooling catalog trying to figure out what would be the best thing to make a part. Uh, there's not always a right answer. You can do things several different ways. The shop that was originally making my parts was actually using some pretty expensive tooling and going kind of slow. And I figured out a little bit different way of doing it, cut about a minute off the cycle time just by, you know, doing things a little bit differently. And actually, uh, I sent the tool that I was using to Ryan and Brandon, and they started using it too, and it cut quite a bit of time off of their cycle too. So
Well, when you want to make a lot of something, that's what it comes down to.
yeah, and you still have to balance price of the tool too versus the machine time. Uh, I think I've shared it with a few of the other guys. I've got a spreadsheet I built out where you can actually like put in, this tool I get 1,000 pieces out of. This one I only get 100 pieces out of, and it kind of tells you exactly how much it costs you to make a part based on the tool life. Uh, on the lathe, cutting 17.4 makes way more sense to try and calculate something like that. On the mill, where you're cutting, well, I'm cutting 6061 aluminum. Tool life is basically infinite. Like you don't wear
Yeah,
through tools in aluminum. So the only end of tools is basically when you screw up.
and that's a good point. I don't know if people realize, like, you buy these cutting tools and you buy inserts for cutting tools. They wear out. Like, there's a
Mm-hmm.
constant cost. You buy a $400 boring bar, you crash it, it breaks. End mills constantly wear out. You're constantly buying end
Oh
mills.
yeah. The
Uh,
grooving tools that I was using. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, you froze there for a second.
Yeah,
We
on,
mi-
on the lathe, the grooving tools were probably my most expensive tool. Some of the parts I was only getting like $12 insert. Uh, yeah, probably the internet flaking a little bit. So, but yeah, like the grooving tools, those were my biggest expense. $12 a tool, you only get 80 parts for it. Uh, may not, and it still sounds pretty good, but it adds up over time. And then, I think I was using 10 tools per part. Some of them, like the drills, they didn't really wear out very fast. I got a couple thousand parts per drill. But then that grooving insert, you only get 80. And sometimes if the insert goes out and you don't realize it, then it takes the tool holder out with it. and then instead of $12, you're at $200. And if it's then you got to realign your machine. So that's just more cost that's kind of hidden.
Yeah, there's a lot of hidden costs. Unfortunately, it looks like we're losing you with your internet, though.
And
So,
I think I mentioned a little machine time. You got to account for that. Like, my. Uh, all right. Well, I suppose that's probably good enough time. I got a private message asking it's a infusion locally.
well, guys, I apologize. I don't know if Mike realizes or not, but his internet, again, it kind of sucks where he's at, and it looks like it's deciding to act up. So we might just have to end it here if it doesn't clear up here in a second. Okay. I haven't disconnected Mike, but we're going to take him down here for a second so I can talk to you guys. Apologize about that. I hopefully his internet clears up here, but we're basically done with this live stream. Again, hopefully everyone got all their questions asked and answered that they want and enjoyed this one. We kind of did some different things. I wanted to highlight some of the complications in manufacturing parts and in making things because I feel like in every aspect of our life, not just firearms and suppressors and whatnot, we underestimate what kind of goes into making anything that we buy. And it's good to have that background and that knowledge and that appreciation for the people who are making our everyday products that we all use. So Mike just texted me, so let's just see if he has. He might try to rejoin real quick to at least say goodbye to you guys if you want to stick around for a moment. But uh, okay, yeah, he can't get it to rejoin. So we're basically done for the evening, unless you guys have something for me. Appreciate everyone tuning in and have a great weekend. Hopefully, you guys got a chance. I know I was a little late in posting our Friday video. Uh, Again, the damn insurance company could literally call me right in the afternoon and took up a good hour of my time. That's normally when I post our Friday video, so I got a little late to it, but it was a very interesting video, I think. Um, I'm really looking forward to taking that topic further with those SDs. Such a simple looking cone, yet when stacked at a certain space, it makes such a more complex design. It's almost disappointing that we really overlooked it months ago. So we'll see you guys later, and everyone have a great weekend.